There are so many people moving to Alberta right now, but is it worth all of the hype? And which city is best to move to? Is it Calgary or Edmonton? The Battle of Alberta. And if you stick around, I'll let you know who comes out on top, and we're going to get into it right now. My name is Ryan Gillard, a real broker. I am a local Calgary real estate agent, but in this video, I'll try to be as honest and impartial as I can possibly be. There are definitely pros and cons to living in both Calgary and Edmonton, and in this video I'll just try to give you all of the information and my take on it to help you out. Now, if you are thinking of buying, selling, or relocating to the Calgary area, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. I'd love to help you out. All right, let's get into it. Now, in the spirit of being impartial, I'm actually going to start off with a major win for Edmonton, and that's the river valley cutting through the entire city. Now, this is the largest urban parkland in North America at around 18,000 acres. It's quite huge, and it includes a bunch of natural areas, parks, trails, playgrounds, and the terrain is also quite diverse. You've got riverbanks, ravines, forests, and meadows. Now, Calgary also has the Bow River and the Elbow River cutting through the city, and we also have the Bow Valley. But I would say Edmonton's valley is a bit more dramatic, in my opinion, if I'm being honest. So I'd give the slight edge here to Edmonton. And overall, though, Calgary does have more park space than Edmonton. I just find that their valley is a bit more dramatic and there's a bit more varied in the terrain. So I'd give the slight edge here to Edmonton. And point number 2 is the location. Now, this is a glaring win for Calgary, and I don't think many people would disagree with this. Calgary is just a more connected city in many ways than Edmonton is, and the glaring win here is close proximity to Kananaskis Country, Canmore, and Banff National Park. You've got some of the best outdoor activities in the world in these areas with downhill skiing, cross-country skiing, tobogganing, skidooing, biking, golf, plenty of dining and shopping options in both Banff and Canmore, hot springs, and many of these places are just 1 to 2 hours from Calgary. You can leave downtown Calgary at 7 a.m. and be on a world-class ski resort by 9 a.m. when they open. Even locations that are a bit further out like Fernie, Golden, Revelstoke are close enough trips from Calgary. And we've also got places like the interior of BC, which are a bit more accessible from Calgary. It's about a 5 to 6 hour drive to places like Vernon, Kelowna, and Kamloops. Now, if we look at Edmonton, if you're downtown Edmonton and you want to go skiing in Jasper or just to visit Jasper, it's about a 4 to 4.5 hour drive to do that. That's about the point where it becomes more of a vacation versus a day trip. And just Calgary is just so much more accessible. Like on the weekend, on Sunday, I went to Canmore and Banff on a whim, just a bunch of friends. And it took an hour to get out to Canmore, and I was back for supper time. So it's just way more accessible. And this is a major win for Calgary. Many people will pick Calgary over Edmonton specifically for this reason. And continuing on with some of the location aspects of Calgary and Edmonton, I would say that the Calgary airport is bigger and more connected than Edmonton is. Calgary serves as an international hub, so you see way more passenger traffic at the Calgary airport. 18.5 million passengers last year in Calgary versus 7.5 million in Edmonton. So there's just way more options at the Calgary airport, more direct flights, more routes basically. And many people that live in Edmonton will drive to Calgary and then fly somewhere else, or they'll fly first from Edmonton to Calgary and then connect somewhere else. So lots of direct flights from the Calgary airport. I've flown direct Calgary to Tokyo, I've been Calgary to London. Lots of options in Europe. You've got Germany, Netherlands, Ireland, England, Scotland, France, all direct flights from Calgary. All over the States, Mexico, and some Central American ports as well. And Edmonton is mainly like a domestic hub with the odd international stop here and there. And the good thing about Calgary is that the airport is actually within the city limits in the northeast part of Calgary. But in Edmonton, the airport is actually maybe 30 to 45 minutes south of the city. So it's a bit of a hassle. I've been there once, and it was kind of in some farmer's field way out in the boonies somewhere. So it's not ideal compared to the Calgary airport. And in the future, I imagine Calgary will have a C-train stop connecting to the airport. I don't know why they haven't done it yet, but it is a great idea, and I think it will happen at some point. And if you're looking at this from a tourist perspective, Calgary is obviously the winner. You've got more direct flights to Calgary, and it's easier access to the Rocky Mountains, which are a major tourist draw if people are looking at Alberta from a tourist perspective. And just the last few points here on the location, let's talk about the LRT system in Calgary and Edmonton. And I would say Calgary has the edge here as well. The train system currently covers more area of the city. So right now, the C-train covers 60 kilometers of Calgary and has 45 stations, while Edmonton's covers 24 kilometers and has 18 stations. Calgary's Green Line, which is currently under construction, will add 46 kilometers of the city and adding another 28 stations. So I would give the edge here to Calgary in terms of the LRT train system. And the last point here on location, I would say Calgary is a bit easier to get around. There are more freeways and busier roads to get where you need to go in Calgary. Calgary's more spread out compared to Edmonton, but I just find it's faster to get around. I find Edmonton to be a bit of a pain in the ass to drive through. I personally find Calgary to be the easiest major city in Canada to drive around in. Definitely easier than Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa. Toronto is legendary traffic. And driving through Montreal, I was super confused. I got lost. So I just find Calgary to be super easy. I would give the edge here to Calgary in terms of freeways and transit. And point number 3, let's talk about arts and culture. This one is a clear win for Edmonton. Edmonton has always had a stronger arts and creative scene compared to Calgary. Maybe because it's the capital city. I find there's always more museums and galleries in capital cities. That could be it. I could be wrong. But the art scene is definitely stronger in Edmonton. It always has been. And the venues that showcase the arts are also better in Edmonton. So in Edmonton's downtown, you've got places like the Art Gallery of Alberta, Winspear Centre, which is home to the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, which is recognized on the world stage. Just south of that is the Citadel Theatre that hosts like world-class events, workshops, and theatrical events. And if you go south of the river, you have the Old Strathcona area, which is definitely a hub for the arts scene in Edmonton. And you've got places like the Transalta Arts Barns, Varscona Theatre, and Walterdale Theatre, which has everything from stage plays, improv, to comedy shows. And if you also go to 124th Street in Edmonton, downtown, there's a bunch of independent art galleries, shops, and restaurants. Now, there's definitely a bigger art scene in Edmonton versus Calgary. That's not to say it doesn't exist in Calgary. I just find that people in Calgary are more outdoorsy than they are artsy, in my opinion. I am generalizing. It is a big city. There's maybe 1.6 million people in the Calgary area. But overall, I don't think Calgary is known for being the most artsy of cities. And that's evident from our city council. Some of their art projects are super expensive and they're a bit suspect, if I'm being honest. So it's something that we have to improve on in Calgary, if I'm being totally honest with you. And continuing on with the arts and culture topic, let's talk about festivals. Now, Edmonton is known as the festival city. I think between like June to September, there's probably a festival every single day of the week. And there are festivals in Calgary, but I would say there are just more in Edmonton, and some of them are pretty cool. You've got the International Fringe Festival every August in Old Strathcona. You've got the Edmonton Folk Music Festival in Cloverdale. This one's pretty cool with the Gallagher Hill, and people are watching live music on the hill. You've got Street Performer Festival, Heritage Days, K-Days, there's a Deep Freeze Festival. So there's just a huge variety of festivals in the Edmonton area. Now, with that said, the biggest cultural event in the province, without question, is the Calgary Stampede. This is a massive event. There are over 1 million people every single year that visit this from all over Canada and internationally. And don't ever let someone from Edmonton tell you that the Calgary Stampede is the same thing as K-Days. Sure, it's true that the rides are on a tour around North America, so the same rides will go to Edmonton after the Stampede, but the Calgary Stampede is so much more than just the rides. It's a giant 2-week party throughout the city. The city shuts down, and it's a lot of fun. So there are more arts and culture events in Edmonton, but I do think the Calgary Stampede is still the biggest event in the province. And the last few points here in arts and culture, let's talk about the bar and restaurant scene in both cities. I would say Edmonton is known as having a lot of mom and pop shops, a lot of the hole-in-the-wall type establishments that offer good food at good prices. Some of the buildings might be a bit dumpy, but they do offer a cool vibe, which I like. And in Calgary, the vibe, I would say, you get a lot more of like the chain stores, big box chain stores, might be newer, shinier. They do offer good food, but maybe the vibe is just a bit different than in Edmonton. I don't know if one is better or worse, just the vibe might be a bit different if you compare the two cities. And next up, let's talk about the climate. Now, we are comparing a bad climate with a bad climate, so take this with a grain of salt. But in general, I think Calgary has a better climate. Edmonton is further north, it gets colder, and they don't have the same Chinook winds effect that Calgary does. Now, if you're not really sure what that is, we basically have warm, moist air from the Pacific Ocean. It flows into British Columbia, it hits the mountains there, and it dumps huge amounts of rain. What's left over is the warm, dry air that flows into southern Alberta, and it can legit change the temperature from, say, minus 25 to plus 10 within hours. And so Calgary gets these over and over again during the winter time. So it could be hot, cold, and it can melt all the snow and warm things up. So in Edmonton, you don't really get the Chinook winds as much, maybe slightly, but not to the same effect as in Calgary. So it just kind of stays cold in the wintertime in Edmonton, and the snow accumulates and they have colder temperatures. So I'd give the win here to Calgary in terms of the climate. And one thing that I'll mention about Edmonton, which I do like, is it actually gets hotter in the summertime compared to Calgary. I think this is because of Calgary's altitude and proximity to the mountains. So we're about 1,100 meters above sea level in Calgary, and I believe Edmonton is about 600. So there's quite the difference there. And because of this, it actually stays warmer at nighttime in Edmonton as well. If you know Calgary, we get a bit chilly, even in the summertime at night. It's not too uncommon to bring a light jacket with you, and it could be like July or August, just because it really cools off quickly at nighttime here. And the next point, let's talk about post-secondary education options in the two cities. So the easy ones first, let's talk about NAIT and SAIT, so the Northern Alberta and the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. I would say they're comparable. I don't know if one is better than the other. Same thing with the Grant MacEwan in Edmonton and Mount Royal in Calgary. I think they're pretty comparable. But I would say the University of Alberta in Edmonton is probably better than the University of Calgary. If I'm being honest, I think it's more internationally renowned and prestigious. And I know a lot of people from Calgary and the area that chose to go to the U of A, and everyone had really good things to say about it. I am not biased. I went to Simon Fraser in Vancouver for university, so I really don't have a strong opinion either way, but I do think that the U of A is definitely it's highly regarded, and I quite like that part of Edmonton. It's kind of tucked into the river valley. You got some really old buildings next to some pretty high-tech buildings too. Just has a cool vibe. So I think I would give the slight edge here to the U of A over the U of C. And the next point, the overall vibe of both cities. Now, one thing that you always hear about when comparing Calgary to Edmonton is that Calgary is more white collar, Edmonton is more blue collar. Now, what does that mean? Now, this is just my kind of take on it, which is subjective, obviously. But I would say Calgary is more cosmopolitan. It wants to be recognized internationally as one of the better spots in the world to live in. And I would say it's bigger, it's flashier, it looks more affluent, it's more scenic. It just has more buzz and excitement to it compared to Edmonton, in my opinion. Now, I find that Calgary is also more famous compared to Edmonton. I think this is in part due to the Winter Olympics being held here in the late 80s. So we had the Olympics, we have the Calgary Stampede every year, and we have the close proximity to Banff National Park, which attracts tourists from all over the world. So I do think Calgary is a bit more famous as well. Now, if we look at Edmonton, I find that Edmonton is just content being Edmonton. They're not really trying to impress anyone. It kind of has like the biggest small town feel to it. And it's definitely more industrial compared to Calgary. And it's definitely noticeable when you drive through both cities. Calgary is definitely way more scenic compared to Edmonton. I quite like the river valley in Edmonton, which I mentioned. But aside from that, Edmonton is fairly flat prairie-like, where Calgary is more, it's maybe half prairie, half foothills. There's definitely way more scenery in the Calgary area, especially in the west side of Calgary. It's quite scenic. Now, which one is better? It just depends what you're looking for. Like, one vibe is not better than the other vibe. They just feel a bit different. And the next point, kind of along the same lines as the overall vibe, I'm going to talk about the downtown core of both cities. Now, this is an easy win for Calgary. 100% Calgary has a better downtown than Edmonton. And I don't think many would disagree with this point or try to argue against it. I would say Calgary's downtown is bigger, it's better, it looks more affluent, it looks shinier, fancier, it's more bustling, there's more to see and do, it's cleaner, it's safer, it's got a better walking score, I would say. In every way, Calgary's downtown is better than Edmonton's, and this is not meant to be a biased take. I just think it's like the cold, hard facts. Calgary has a better downtown than Edmonton in every way. And if we look at Edmonton, I'd say it's still a bit of a work in progress. Before the new arena was built, there was like no reason to go downtown unless you absolutely had to, or if you were going there for work. Evenings and weekends, it was a ghost town. And unless you wanted to hang out with a bunch of sketchy people, there was absolutely no reason to go downtown. So this is a clear win for Calgary. And the next point, and this is a big one, is the cost of real estate in both cities. Now, the reason I started making these videos in the first place is because all of my clients were coming from Ontario and British Columbia. They're being priced out across Canada, and they're looking for places to live, work, raise a family that aren't outrageously expensive. And Alberta's popping up on many people's radars for that reason. And so I'll just touch on the real estate stats in both cities. And I'll start off with Edmonton here, and you can see that the prices in Edmonton are quite attractive. It is considerably cheaper than Calgary, and the average price across all property types, so we have detached homes, condos, townhouses, duplexes, is $399,000 is the average price in Edmonton. Very attractive. If we look at detached homes, about $484,000. Now, this is kind of like how Calgary was in maybe like 2010, I'm guessing. So it's quite a bit cheaper than Calgary. And we've got, for duplexes, the average price about $378,000. The average price of a townhouse, $269,000. And the average price of a condo is $193,000. So definitely Edmonton has some attractive real estate prices, especially if you're looking at this coming from British Columbia or Ontario. Like, this is a huge sale for you guys that are thinking of making the move. And I'll just pull up Calgary now. So Calgary stats are a bit more expensive. So our average price across all property types is $572,300. Again, this is the average of detached homes, condos, duplexes, townhouses. The average price of a detached home in Calgary is $702,200, up 12.6% year over year. And these prices keep climbing. It's kind of scary, actually, how fast the prices have climbed in Calgary. Before COVID started, this average price was probably like $550,000, and they keep climbing. It's a bit concerning. For duplexes, the average price $625,000, townhouses $426,000, and for condos $324,000. Edmonton is definitely cheaper than Calgary, but if you're looking at this again from a Toronto or a Vancouver perspective, I think both jurisdictions are way more affordable compared to other parts of the country. And last on my list here, let's talk about the economy and politics. Now, there are some subtle differences between the two cities, but in general, you hear that Calgary is more white collar and Edmonton is more blue collar. Calgary has the second most head offices in the country behind Toronto. So you see a lot of, it's more of like an entrepreneurial vibe in Calgary. A lot of head offices that are dealing in the oil and gas sector. You see a lot of financial people, insurance execs, engineers, geologists, accountants, stuff like that. And in Edmonton, it's a bit more industrial. You see a lot of the blue collar workforce in Edmonton. So you might work at a head office in Calgary for an oil company, but you might work for oil and gas services in Edmonton. So one's not better, they just have a bit of a different focus between the two cities. Now, one thing I should mention about Edmonton is that it is the capital of Alberta, so you do see a lot of the government jobs centered around the Edmonton area. I don't recall seeing too many government jobs, both provincially and federally, in the Calgary area. I don't come across many people that work for the government. But in Edmonton, you do see that. And I think that's why Edmonton tends to vote more left or NDP leaning, just because that party seems to really focus on the unions and the government workers. Whereas in Calgary, it's a bit more of an entrepreneurial hub. So you see a lot of people voting for the Conservative Party in Calgary. Now, I'm just generalizing here. They're both big cities and you can find people voting for all sorts of different parties. But in general, I'd say Calgary is more conservative and Edmonton is more of the NDP style of politics. And to finish up, which one is the better city? It just depends on what you're looking for. There's no right or wrong answer. Both cities have good things and bad things about them. Now, if you want my opinion, I think I would choose Calgary. I just think it's a bit more mild. It's close to the mountains. There are better jobs here. And it's just a bit more scenic, I think. So I think I would choose Calgary. Now, this is me being a bit biased living in Calgary, but that's my take on it. Thanks again for watching, and if you are thinking of buying, selling, or relocating to the Calgary area, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. I'd love to help you out, and I'll see you on the next video.